Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. Today is Friday, January 20th, and today we are exactly 2 weeks into the governing session in the Republican controlled House of Representatives. And we've seen some interesting things, including things like passing a rules package that really includes no real policy. We are also hitting the debt ceiling as of yesterday. And a lot of the things that have been passed so far just really indicate this Republican Party that isn't serious about governing. We've seen new committee formations with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert on key committees like the Oversight Committee and also Homeland Security Committee. So it's a very, very concerning situation right now that we have in the House. And today I am so lucky to be joined by someone who's actually serving in the House for the first time, and she is Congresswoman Summer Lee from the great state of Pennsylvania. Congresswoman Lee, thanks so much for being here. It's so great to see you.
Definitely. Thanks so much for having me, Victor. It's great to be here.
Of course. So I want to start off by asking you about your historic candidacy and win, because as I understand it, you're the first Black woman to get elected from Pennsylvania to the U.S. Congress. So I'm wondering, talk to us first about what made you want to run for office and what it feels like now to be a
Mhm.
Congresswoman.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, I mean, yeah. First of all, it's we say it a lot, and I say it a lot, but it doesn't make that statistic like less
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
absurd, right? That we've had no representation for Black women for an entire demographic for the history of this country.
Yeah.
And I ran honestly because of that, right? I felt like in government, it's supposed to be reflective. It's supposed to reflect our lived experiences, our diversity, our differences in perspectives. And that's not what we get in government, right? Oftentimes people look the same, they sound the same, they come from similar backgrounds. And I think that that's the reason why we see a lack of urgency when it comes to issues impacting people,
Right.
like me, that look like me. So I ran for the state house in 2018 because of that. And we'll see. Ask me in a couple more weeks.
Sounds good. Well, I want to start. Well, I want to transition over to now that you're serving in the House, because everything that we've seen under no circumstances normal. And you started off your first kind of introduction to the House, seeing the fiasco of Kevin McCarthy being elected as Speaker, and it took him 15 tries. And I'm wondering what it was like to be on that House chamber floor during your first week and seeing Kevin McCarthy struggle so much to attain enough votes to become Speaker.
It was far less interesting than you all think it was. I feel like C-SPAN was having its best moment, but for us, genuinely, we were it's the first time that I'd ever been on the House floor as a member, right?
Right,
We kind of
right.
walk in, you know very little. We had just picked up our pen, and picked up our badges to vote. So it's really hours and hours and hours at a time doing the same
Yeah.
thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's a vocal vote. So we have to sit there and we have to wait for our names to be called. So it was actually quite boring. And really, I would say it went from boring to frustrating really
Yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
because you are reminded, even in like the chaos and the fiasco and the kind of embarrassment that is for them, that this is our government
Mhm.
and that people sent us here to do a task and we're not doing it. So it got
Well, I mean, meanwhile, while Kevin McCarthy was struggling to get enough votes, Hakeem Jeffries received the vote of every Democrat every single round, and it kind of speaks to his historic candidacy and also position as the first Black man to lead a major party in Congress. And what does that mean for you? I mean, you're the first Black woman to serve from Pennsylvania, and he's the first Black person to lead a party. What does that mean to you? And how is, I guess, Hakeem Jeffries now planning to unite the Democratic Party in the House?
I just want to say that Black people have been here for
Yeah.
centuries.
Mhm.
We've been in this country for centuries. And the fact that we are still having
Yeah.
historic moments is noteworthy. And I think that what it shows is that we have a new generation that's coming in.
Yeah.
Um, coming into its own politics. That generation is blacker and browner. It's
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
progressive. It's more global in its awareness because of the internet age. And it's a generation that is demanding a more reflective democracy and it's holding it accountable for it. So I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
when we see our new leadership, when we see new people coming in, it has to reflect that. So I think that that's that the first thing is, yes, we want to have representation by race, but also we want to have representation by values and
Mhm. Mhm.
representation by the way we do our politics. So we have more first yet to have. So I'm excited to see where we're able to move, with this new generation coming in.
Well, speaking of generation, I know Gen Z was pretty instrumental for your cycle and your election. And so I'm wondering, I'm part of Gen Z, and a lot of the work that I do is trying to mobilize Generation Z. How do you plan to represent them in Congress now?
Certainly. I mean, first of all, our taskers represent everybody. I
Yep.
think that as a millennial, I'm not far off from you all, right? But for Maxwell, I'd be on the younger end
Hmm.
of Congress. So I mean, when I think about the issues impacting young people, I'm not far off from those. These are
Yeah.
issues of security, right? How are we going to afford housing, an economy that's increasingly leaving us behind? How are we going to fight for our climate crisis, particularly
Hmm.
me coming from
Hmm.
a community that's one of the worst when it comes to air pollution? How are we ensuring that young voters and young folks have access to opportunities, whether it's
Yeah.
college or vocational, right? And that they're not going into generational debt for that, right? Those are things that I think my generation first kind of ushered us into, and that we need to be sure that we are keeping your generation from it. So we'll take the experiences that I've had and the experiences that my generations had, making sure that we aren't making the mistakes of the generations before us by excluding y'all and excluding your expertise and really your perspective.
That's totally great to hear. And also, I'm grateful for your voice in Congress and shedding light on these issues. But I can't help but think about this current composition of the Congress right now, with Republicans being in control and just showing, at least so far, no willingness to move on any of those issues. And so I'm wondering, just in these last 2 weeks, with them having the majority under their belt, have you seen anything in terms of their priorities and ability to govern and their willingness to work on the issues, like you said, climate change, housing, getting dark money out of politics?
Those are issues that they're here for, right? I hate to break it to you all, but they are here for what they did. They're here for precisely what happened with that circus, 2 weeks ago.
Mhm,
They're
mhm.
here to keep, and make sure that folks aren't able to access their earned, Social Security or Medicare. They're here to make sure that we are not advancing the causes of working people and instead are putting, or holding water for corporations and tax cheats, right? That's what their priorities are. So
Yeah.
no, I don't think that there are going to be bipartisan opportunities to increase inequity, or to increase injustice. And I don't hope to do that. But I think what we need to do in the interim is that we need to get rid of them. We need to send a message to Americans that this is who they are, that they are not a party that's operating in good faith. And we need to
Right.
organize around that.
I totally agree. And that was actually one of my next questions is, given this unwillingness from them to just work on anything, what do you think is the best way to push back against what they're doing in the
Mhm.
House? What should be the messaging that Democrats tell
Yeah.
the American people when they talk about this Republican Party?
Well, I think first of all, yeah, you know what? I think that we need to tell the truth about the Republican Party.
Mhm.
Enough of the, oh, we need a strong Republican Party. Enough of there are good folks on each side. Enough of that, right? We need to be honest that the Republican Party from top to bottom is a party of insurrection. From top to bottom
Mhm.
is a party of
Mhm.
inequity and inequality, is a party of injustice. And we need to be very clear about that in our messaging. And the best way to do that is to also decide who we're going to be. Right?
Yeah,
Are we
yeah.
going to be the party of the people? Are we going to be the party of corporations? Will we be the party of a reflective democracy? Or will we be the party of just unfettered spending and primaries? Right. So we have to pick a side, and then we have to be on one accord as we organize around it. So we can't just say it. We have to go out. We have to go in communities that we've not been in. We have to go back and win folks who we've sacrificed and let go of. We have to go and make sure that we're appealing to young people, that we're centering them in our decisions, that we're appealing to Black and brown folks and centering them in our decisions. And we have the base built.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to talk to you about committee assignments, because so far what we've seen from Republicans are, I mean, just really absurd committee assignments, like Marjorie Taylor Greene on the Homeland Security Committee, even though that she once denied 9/11, although she walked that back, but she once denied 9/11. Lauren Boebert, Paul Gosar, a bunch of these insurrectionists and people who deny the 2020 election on the Oversight Committee, which will be key for investigating the Biden administration, also Democrats. What do you make of their committee assignments so far? And have you gotten any committee assignments yourself?
We do not have committee assignments yet.
Okay.
So that's something that we're still waiting for. We're still lobbying. And now, you you mentioned that we knew that wherever we land, and it's going to be difficult because we're going to be dealing with people who are unreasonable. We're going to
Right.
be dealing with people who don't have the best interests of us in mind. But that said, I mean, this shows their priorities. This shows that there is no fringe, no extreme to that party, right?
Yeah.
Their fringe is their base. Their fringe is their
Yeah. Yeah.
mainstream. That they got these type of committee assignments with the values and the views that they have, with the actions they've taken, shows that the Republican Party is willing to cater to them, that they are them, and that this is the direction that they are going to go towards henceforth, right? So this isn't the
Mhm.
end of this,
Mhm.
and we need to be damn sure that in the next 2 years we remember that, as we are fighting back.
Absolutely. So In terms of, I guess, your committee assignments, and nothing brings me more joy than seeing you go up against someone like Jim Jordan or someone on the Judiciary Committee. I know you were on the Judiciary Committee, I think, in the House in Pennsylvania. Talk about what that committee process is like. So, what are you lobbying for, and when can we expect to see your committee assignments come out?
So unfortunately, I can't tell you when we're going to get committee assignments. That is above my pay grade. But you're right. I was in a Judiciary Committee for 4 years. It's my wheelhouse. It really aligns not just with the things that you think are natural fits, right? Criminal legal reform, right? Cash bail, issues like that, police addressing police violence, right? All of that falls within that, but also democracy reform. And in democracy reform is dark money, campaign finance reform, and making sure that we have a strong voice, reminding us that our North Star has to be a reflective democracy and a strong one. And we can't have that with folks who are able to, put millions and millions into IEs. So all of that is within the purview and the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee. So it'd be an honor to serve there. I know it's going to be difficult. There are other committees that I think would be, fantastic. I think there's a lot of work to do. As progressives, we need folks who are going to be able to address housing and healthcare and environmental justice. And we need to be able to do them in the spaces where we have jurisdiction. So I'd be honored to be on any of those.
Yeah, no, we will all be watching you closely because, again, those committees are important and we want to see your voice on those. One last question. We talked a lot about young people out there and how we can represent them. What is your message to young people right now who might be thinking about going into politics, who see this Congress and look at themselves, maybe in someone like Hakeem Jeffries or yourself, now that we have representation in someone like Maxwell Frost? What is your advice to them in getting that first step in politics and making a difference?
First of all, the first step, take it, right? Take it. Wherever you are, from whatever position you're in right now, whether it's your couch or you are in activism or you're in education, where you're in school, take that step. It's going to be frightening. The second thing that I would say is don't spend money on consultants to ask them to change you, right? Don't allow an expensive consultant to make you inauthentic. If you are going to be a young person who enters politics, we need you as you. We don't need you to come and put on a mask and pretend to be somebody else, right? We don't need you to mimic different generations, older politicians. We don't need you to mimic, only white men. We don't need you to mimic their accents, their voices, their mannerisms. We need you to show up as you with your experience and your perspective and your ideas and your vision, right? Because it is less limited than others. So come as you with all that you have to bring.
Oh, I love that. And we see that authenticity within you and also you being an inspiration for myself and so many others. Congresswoman Lee, thank you so much for joining me this morning and best of luck in this next term. We will all be cheering you on.
Thanks for having me so much. Looking forward to talking in the future.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Well, Congresswoman Lee is definitely on fire, and I am really looking forward to seeing her. And I think, it reflects this broad array of Democrats who are just so talented and so capable, and I think just offers such a stark contrast to what we're seeing with the Republican Party. It's more diverse, more capable, and I'll argue much smarter than the Republican Party. So Congresswoman Lee is a force, and she will be a great representative, and she already is a great representative now that she has 2 weeks under her belt. Just a couple of news pieces this morning before we go into the weekend. The first is yesterday, the Supreme Court announced in this 2-page report that it was unable to identify the leaker of the draft opinion that overturned Roe versus Wade. If you might remember, there was a Dobbs decision that came out in June, and a few months before that, in I think it was May, the Supreme Court, there was a leak released to Politico, and Politico released it to the public, basically saying that Roe would be overturned. And there was this fury and outlash after that, as it should have been. And so now they've conducted investigations after a few months, and they have found no one. And, that just doesn't really scream confidence from the Supreme Court. How can we trust them? I think Mueller, she wrote, put this best on Twitter. How can we trust the Supreme Court to make decisions about our key rights if they can't even identify the person of this leaked draft? They interviewed about 90-ish people. It took a few months, and, they didn't even interview any of the Supreme Court justices, which is to me the most absurd part of this. We saw what happened with Samuel Alito. There might have been a leaked decision from him in the Hobby Lobby case. And so it's like, how do you not interview your own justices? I think they are not above reproach in this situation. And so the Supreme Court has a lot of cleaning up to do. And they said they'll continue the investigation, but this just doesn't really scream confidence from the Supreme Court that we should be all putting our trust into. So we'll see what happens with that. Today is also the 2-year anniversary of President Biden getting sworn in, and it's been a really extraordinary 2 years. I know there's been some highs and lows, but for the most part, it's been a historic administration. I would argue probably the most historic since FDR or LBJ. I mean, you think of the things that he's been able to do with the narrowest of margin in the Senate. And I would argue, in the Senate, it's actually more Republican with people like Joe Manchin and Krista Sinema there. But this narrow margin in the Senate with Vice President Kamala Harris being the tie-breaking vote, and then also in the House of Representatives, barely having enough votes there. And so he was able to pass things like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a historic investment in climate change, lowering the cost of inflation, which we're seeing right now. The economy is improving at a pace that I don't think anyone expected. Unemployment is down at the lowest rate in over 50 years. We're seeing jobs up. I mean, it's really extraordinary things on the economy. You saw him pass the Respect for Marriage Act, which enshrined interracial and also same-sex marriage, giving people the rights that they deserve. You see him passing the long-awaited Infrastructure Act, which was always, memed as the Infrastructure Week. I mean, all of these things are so incredible. And, I can't help but mention as a young person for Generation Z, relieving student loan debts for millions of people across the country, expunging those with simple marijuana possession on the federal level. I mean, you think about all of these things and what he's been able to accomplish. And this is someone who has had so many years of experience under his belt. And I think it's quite the indication that President Biden knows what he's doing. And in these next 2 years, it'll be hard with the current Republican-controlled Congress, but it's, it'll offer a stark contrast to see what happened over the last 2 years and what's going to happen in the next 2 years when Republicans are in control. And so I know the White House is celebrating today, and 2 years past, it's hard to believe it's been 2 years after that inauguration, just days after the January 6th insurrection and days after Donald Trump, or I guess the day after Donald Trump left office, and hopefully he will stay out of office. But those are the two biggest pieces of news that I have for you today. We'll be back next week for more episodes of On the Move. We'll be back every day, bright and early, at least here on the West Coast at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. And we've got a packed lineup of guests for you, and you do not want to miss it. Again, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Be sure to like and subscribe to Politicon's YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great rest of your weekend.